A couple more questions from 11.3 having to do with subsidized and non-subsidized loans. So the difference between a subsidized loan and a non-subsidized loan is the subsidized loan, you don't pay interest until you start paying off the loan. So if you're, in this case, this is a subsidized loan and it's for 8 years, the amount is $21,000 and the rate is 4.1%. We're asked to come up with the monthly payment after this person graduates. So this person, she took out a $21,000 loan for 8 years. It's subsidized, so she does not pay interest for that 1 year. If it was not subsidized, then that 1 year of interest would be added to the value before we come up with the monthly payment formula. And we'll see that on the other side of the board. We'll do an example of an unsubsidized loan. But in this case, even though she's waiting a year before she starts to pay this loan off, the total is still going to be $21,000. So we've gone through our monthly payment formula before. It's going to be the remaining amount, and in this case, that's $21,000. And the R over N, so we get R, and N is always going to be 12 for these monthly payment formulas. And we have this lovely formula raised to the negative N. T, N is always 12. T here is 8 years. So 12 times 8 is going to be negative 96 in the denominator there. Okay, so remember how we did this in the previous video? We calculate this number, we store it to a letter A, we then use that number again here, add 1 to it, and raise to this exponent, and store that to the letter B. And then all we have to do is multiply the original amount by what we've stored in A and B in this form. And you want to put parentheses around the denominator. You want to put parentheses around that whole thing. So let's go to our calculator and calculate this. Again, I'll show you maybe one more time here how to come up with this value. All right, there's our calculator. So we want to first calculate A, the 0.041 divided by 12. 0.041 divided by 12. Hit enter, and now we're going to store that value to the letter A. All right, so every time we hit A now, we get that value that we stored. Now we're going to add 1 to that and raise it, in this case, to the negative 96. Negative 96. And that's going to be our B value. We store that to B. Right? Now every time we hit B, we get that value. So now all we got to do, so now we've stored to A and B. Right? We've stored this value to A. We've stored this whole thing to B. So now all we got to do is multiply the remaining amount by this ratio, being careful with our parentheses. So let's go back and say 21,000 times, in parentheses, the numerator is A, the denominator in parentheses is 1 minus B. Close the parentheses for the denominator, close the parentheses for that whole fraction, and we get our monthly payment of $256.95. And that is your answer for number 34. So subsidized loan, 8 years, 21,000, 4.1% after 1 year. So it's going to take her 8 years. It does not increase because it's subsidized. So the total amount doesn't change after that 1 year. We plug in all the values into our monthly payment formula, and we come up with our answer of $256.95. All right, so now if we look at an unsubsidized example, we will see the difference. So now this is unsubsidized for 6 years, $30,000 at a rate of 5.2%. But this guy is waiting 4 years before he starts paying this loan off, and it's unsubsidized. So if it's unsubsidized, he's paying interest for those 4 years. So he's paying simple interest for those 4 years. So the interest, accumulated interest over the 4 years that he's waiting, right? He graduates in 4 years, is just going to be our PRT, right? From earlier in this chapter, the principal times the rate times the time. Time is in 4 years here. So we have 30,000. The rate is 5.2, so 0.52 for 4 years. All right, so we're going to add this number to the total before we go to the monthly payment formula. So 30,000 times 0.052 times 4 is $6,240, and that's going to be added to that total. Right? So now the total to be repaid, total amount to be repaid is going to be the 30,000 plus the 6,240. So now we have $36,240 as the amount to be repaid. And now we go back to our monthly payment formula and use that amount as our remaining amount. And we do the same formula we did in number 34. We have the R is 0.052. N is always 12 for a monthly payment formula. And we get this lovely fraction. And the exponent is negative NT. N again is always 12. We're taking 6 years this time. So 12 times 6 gives us negative 72. And we know how to plug this in, right? We say 0.52 divided by 12. We store that to our letter A. All right, so this is going to be our letter A in our calculator. And then we're going to calculate this value here and call it B. So I've already got this fraction as A. I'm going to add 1 to that number and raise it to the negative 72. And then I can just say 36,240 times A over 1 minus B. So I'm storing that value to be this value. So now I just have A over 1 minus B times that remaining amount, 36,240 times A divided by 1 minus B. And my monthly payment should come out to be $587.01. And that is your answer to number 36. So difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized, you do not accumulate interest in the waiting period. Unsubsidized loans, you do accumulate interest over that waiting period of 4 years. You add that accumulated interest to the total, and then you calculate your monthly payment. Good times.